In this video, we're going to be covering things that you can do for your server that are completely optional for you and your team, and I believe this is going to be the final video for the server section. So it's going to be more so a miscellaneous kind of video, but it's still extremely important, so I would definitely recommend that you take your time watching this. So we talked a little bit about SSH before in the past and how you can connect to a server and whatnot with it, but now we need to figure out how to make it a little bit more secure. Currently, if we go into a command prompt and we know the server address, what we can do is we can try to do SSH root, but in this case it's WoW. Normally it'll always be root, and there is a root, but of course we're doing WoW because we know that, and you can try to connect to it. And of course, if you know the password, then you automatically get access. This, looking at it, is a vulnerability because for those who try to brute force these servers, it is more or less, if you will, pretty simple in order to gain access. And there have been some really popular private servers that have actually fallen and vanished because of it, and they were never able to recover. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to get these tokens and what to do with them. First things first, you're going to go into your command prompt. And what you're going to do is you're going to type SSH keygen with more or less one word, but it's a hyphen. It's going to say generating. You're like, oh yay, it's going to ask you the name. We're just going to call it Wowzer. That's our password already. I've already done this before, so I'm just going to hit yes, no passphrase, and voila, we have ourselves a key. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our files. I'm going to quickly on my other screen head to that directory. It's basically go to your C drive. Then from there, you're going to go to users, then your username, and it's either in your .ssh folder, or it's going to be directly right in your main directory, right here, see users, my name, Argus Elijah, right here. Now, you have your private key. You never want to give this out. You can Google why you don't want to give this out, but basically, it's your private one. Don't give it out. This one right here is your public one. Okay, this is the key that will give you access to other servers, essentially, so long as you assign it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and show more options. Go to Notepad++, and what we're going to do is we're going to see this very long string. And if we wanted to, at the very end, we could have attached a name or so, but in this case, we are just going to leave it with our desktop name. And what you would typically do if you have a system admin is you would give the system admin this key. Now, because, of course, we're our own system admins, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go and add this key yourself. So, in this case, what you would do is you would, say, send it to whoever, or you would bring it over. I don't have copy-paste, so I'm just going to show you how you would do this rather than actually do it myself. And you go into terminal. You go to cd//ssh. You ls it. You see that there's nothing there. So if this is the case, you're just gonna cat.//ssh. Oh, sorry. Cat squigglyline.ssh/id_rsa.pub. Let's see here. So we got nothing at all. Okay. So in this case, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to create a directory. So we're going to, or not create a directory, sorry, I'm getting mixed up here. We're going to have to create a file called authorized keys. And what you would typically do is just do that. You would literally bring in the key, and then after that, you would hit Control X, you press save, and you name it authorized keys. I'm just going to cancel it out, and then sure enough, it would be inside this directory. Now, afterwards, you're going to want to make sure it's set to proper permissions. So you're just going to do chmod 700 squigglyline.ssh. And then after that, you're going to do chmod 600 squigglyline.ssh/authorized_keys. Now, once you do this, you have to head out and over into the SSH config, which is sudo nano etc ssh sshd.config, _config. It's going to ask you for your password because this is a very sensitive file, and we're going to scroll down. So what we're going to look for is we're going to look for the password, which usually password authentication. Let's see. Here it is. And you can see here that it's password authentication. So what we can do here is then just switch it over to being no, because by default it's set to yes, and we're done. Now after that point, sometimes you may have to permit empty passwords right here in order to make it actually work, because it's like, what? It's just a key. But usually it will suffice for you. In my case, for example, I have a server where it doesn't need it whatsoever. This can be just hashtagged and it's completely fine. But that's how you enable the SSH key. And then in order to connect afterwards, what you quite literally do is just SSH, username, at the IP address, and you immediately connect. If it doesn't work for some reason, then what you have to do is restart SSH, which is sudo.systemctl, restart SSHD, and then try it again, and it should work for you. So that's how you set up your SSH keys. But now, for example, how do we set it up so we don't have to give players a IP address for the game? Because we don't want to do that. We want to give players a specific URL like logon.game.net. Well, it's really straightforward to do, actually. What we're going to do is we're going to buy a domain. And then once we get a domain, it's going to have a DNS. Now, the DNS can be migrated over to somewhere else, such as, say, Cloudflare, which I would highly recommend doing because it's actually quite free. And then after that, what you can do is you can set up a specific domain, a specific subdomain linking to that address, or of course directly to the address, but you want to make it a subdomain. So in this case, what you're going to see once you're over at Cloudflare is you're going to, of course, link it to the DNS records. And after that, all we have to do is just set up a type. Let me write it out here. We're going to do a type A with the name being logon and the content being IP address, and then just set it to DNS only. Also show a photo so that way you guys can see how it's meant to be configured and what the UI looks like, but I don't want to screw up because I have two important domains and I don't know who's gonna, all see this information. Alright, the next step is we're gonna download a software. It's called webadmin. Webadmin is a really nice tool because it allows you to actually go into a browser and basically have full access over your machine. So how to install webadmin? It's really straightforward. You see here, download and installing. We're going to just quite literally copy this over and paste. And we can see here that we don't have curl. So that's really easy to do. We just sudo apt install curl. And then what we're going to do is we'll just hit the up arrow until we find the curl command that we want again. And now it's finished. And then we'll run the secondary command and we'll paste. So of course it says you must be root. So we'll up arrow and slide all the way over. Type in sudo. It's going to ask if we want to set up the release repo. We do. We're just going to type yes and hit enter. Now we're downloading, installing, and cleaning basically the whole shebang of webadmin. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to install the recommended. So we're going to git app install -- install recommends webadmin username. It's going to say that, are you root? We're going to go all the way back up, type sudo. We're going to hit yes. Alright, and once webadmin is installed, all we're going to do is go to 127.0.0.1, and then we're going to go ahead to 10,000. Where's 100,000? I think it's 10,000. I'm a dork. Okay, we're going to hit accept. There we go. And now we have webadmin installed. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out what the default username and password for webadmin. The default username for webadmin is generally root, and the corresponding password is a root password of your system. So we're going to go to root, and we're going to see if this works. Sure enough, not. So we're going to type in WoW and Wowzer. See if that works. Voila! Because of course we don't have technically the name root, so it's WoW, and now we have Wowzer. And now we're in. So here you can see why I had you install this. We can see, for example, the system information, we can see the real memory, we can see the virtual memory, the local disk space, and we see everything essentially in real time. So for the monitoring of the traffic and things of that nature, it allows us to be able to see what's going on, of course our recent logins, the network interfaces, the disks being used, everything everywhere all at once. Not like the movie. And this also allows you to do other cool things like the backups, the changing of passwords if you want, the disk and network file systems. There's so much to this tool that I could spend an entire video on it, but we're not going to do it. The cool snippets I will show you is, of course, the general interface are here, the packages that you can update, the file system manager that you can use instead of going through SSH, the terminal, so if you do need to access the terminal for the system, as well as, of course, the just general information that you can use here, such as implementing users for your webadmin so it's not just you. But here's a problem that we have, because if we go to, for example, here, and we type in 10,000, we'll see that we run into a problem here. We can't actually access this address for some reason. The reason is the port's not open. But if we change that, sudo www 10,000, then possibly it'll change itself. And we'll see, now we have access. But here's the thing, we don't really want to have everyone to be able to per se access this, right? Because if we allow that, then everyone on the internet can have access to this URL. So what we want to do possibly, and this is a choice you have, personally I prefer it, is I like to make sure that I'm only the one able to connect, or those who need to connect are able to. So for example, what we're going to do is we're going to do an SSH tunnel. So normally within a network, here's a big fancy wall, you're here, okay? This is where the network is. You have your computers, computer number 1, computer number 2, computer number 3. But I have my own internet over here. Okay, I have my own computers that are over here, you know, computer number 1, computer number 2. But we want to be able to access this entire network, or say rather computer. Well, given that of course it's a server that we're running, we want to be able to access all of its programs. So in this case, this is the server, or this is the computer, and these are all the different applications. So normally it's all local hosted, so it's only the computer that can access it. 127.0.0.1 on port 3306, say MySQL, or webadmin 10,000. Now we would have to open up a port every time that says, okay, now you have access to it. Every single time that you want to enter it, this is a possibility that you can see, you know, it's broadcasting. But what we're going to do instead is we're going to change that. Instead, we're going to say, hey, we're going to tunnel through so you can keep your wall, but our SSH information is the access point. I would remove this line up here, but hey. So we have to connect via SSH link before we get access to all these internal bits. Now, in order to do that, it's really straightforward. What we do is we type the following. We go into our command. Here we are. And we're going to type SSH space -L. And then the port, the local port that we're going to connect to. So it can be really anything we want, but we're just going to make it, say, 10,000. just to make it easily rememberable. Localhost, and then we're going to type in the port that is on the servers. So we're going to type in 10,000 and not 1,000 like I did before. WoW at, and now we're going to have to type in the IP address. So in this case, it's going to be 192.168.192.168.45.61. We're going to enter. We're going to type in the password. You're going to see here that we're connected. Now, if I go to, for example, 127.00.1.10,000, you'll see that it successfully connects. See? And here we are. This is not running on my machine, but yet, at the same time, we're able to connect. But now if I exit this, or we'll just hit Control-C and we'll close the connection. If I were to still try to continue logging into it, you'll see that it has a problem. It says that it can't be reached, but now I try to reconnect with the tunnel. Here we go again. I go back to the URL, and now I'm back. That's something to keep in mind while you're doing this, because normally what happens is you'll have folks who are running their servers on GitHub. But personally, I don't like using GitHub because it can have your source be taken down. So I prefer to have my source locally hosted, which is right here. You'll see at the bottom left, it says git.faithnet. This is what I like to use. I use Gitia. So if you want to use something like this, you can, but it's just what I do. You click up here, Gitia official site. Here's our download. It's really straightforward. Once again, you just look through however you're supposed to install it, or you can go here if you're not in a GUI, and it has all these documentations for you to install Git. Now, what you can also install is something called Nextcloud. Nextcloud is really nice. They have had some really questionable changes recently, but it's still pretty nice. This is something that I would possibly recommend opening up on a temporary basis and then closing it depending on how you want to do it. But this is your own cloud. So you can set up your own cloud in your computer or on your own server, and then you can host files. It's the same as, for example, going to MediaFire, putting in a file that you need to upload or send to a developer, getting a link, and then giving it to someone. Nextcloud does this all for you. And so if you're a server that needs to keep track of all these files or so, and you're like, oh gosh, I really need to have backups of a backup host on some kind of cloud service just in case, this is how this would work essentially. So you can make the server become your cloud. Now, that being said, if the server ever goes poof, so does your files, but you can also say, do this on a different server as well. Now, the next thing that I want to get into is how to install PM2 and how to use it. So PM2 is a really nice popular processing manager. However, it can be really annoying to initially install. So these are some weird commands, but it's npm install --g PM2. We're going to allow that to run. And by the way, the -g just means it can be used from anywhere, basically. So that's really all it means. We'll see here that it's having access to deny permissions. So once again, we'll have to sudo this. And that should do the trick. So now what we're going to do, now that we have PM2 installed, we're going to type PM2 list. We're going to see if it works, and sure enough, it starts spawning. So one thing to note is when you're doing something that you want to run, I'm just going to make an example here. We're going to quickly make a directory hi. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but we're going to try it. And I'm going to touch and make just a test file. Hi. Just play with it. Now, if I want this file to run and automatically reboot when it fails, I can just type /hi. Okay, maybe I'm slow. Sorry about that. You have to type start PM2 start /hi. There we go. Now you'll see that's on, and it's going to be running that file constantly. Now, this is what you would do with your world server, and your auth server. So you'd be touching pm2 start./auth server, and then pm2 start./world server, and then you let these two run in pm2. Once you do that, you type pm2 save. You're going to see it saying that it was saved successful. And now the question is, if you want pm2 to launch on startup. If you do want to launch on startup, all you do is type pm2 startup, just like that. And voila, now it says, hey, you know, in order to start this script, essentially, right here, you're going to copy and run this script. So you're just going to quite literally just copy this, and then you're going to paste it. Oh, sorry. Let me recopy this. I'm going to paste it. Give it a moment. It's going to go crazy. And now we're done. So all we're going to do is type pm2 save. And now on reboot, this is automatically going to launch the server. So say the server completely crashes, but you want the auth server and world server running at all times. This is how you would do it. Then after that, you can try to reboot and see if it's still going, which of course it will, so it's not a problem. And that's how you start an auto reboot for and with pm2. I personally prefer pm2 because you have a monitor function, so you can see live how things are going on. There's a bunch of really cool stuff that are in here. You can see the logs that are being displayed. You can really configure it to be as is needed. The last thing I want to mention is when you have yourself two world servers. So normally you have a dev server and you have a production server. So we're going to call this dev. We're going to call this production. Now, typically what ends up happening is you don't run them on the same server. You don't have a production and a dev running on the same computer. Is another way of saying it. You want to have them on different servers. So you're paying $5 over here, but your production server is, say, $50. So what you're going to want to do is you typically want to make it to where you can, in fact, log in to one realm list, which would say be log on dot site. And when players go to this, and they type in their account information, they get two choices. They can either go straight to the dev server, or they can go to the production server, which in this case would be, say, called Androhol, and this one, staging and testing. So in order to do this, what you need to do is first set up the DNS to link to your site, which is right here. Then the second one is make the world server and the auth table of production go live. And now, since the production has your main authentication server, this is going to technically be your primary authentication server. You can have a little middle one that then speaks to both your servers, but in this case, we're trying to be relatively cheap, so we're going to presume that your auth server is on production. Now, in order to do this, this server is hosting a world server, okay? It's holding world server data. But what it doesn't have is it does not have the location of the auth server because it can't access that. So what you need to do is figure out how to get our server dev to talk to production no matter where it is. Well, you could, of course, open up the port for MySQL and allow everyone to be able to talk to it. So your own devs would be able to go through it as well. People can as well try to sniff it and see that the port's open. Or what you can do is be on the safe side and just implement an SSH tunnel from dev to production to then get the information of the, let me resay this, to get access to the database. Now, inside the database itself, you can from there create user accounts to which then you can have it be specifically limited to that information. For example, let's see if I can pull up a development server just really briefly here. I don't seem to be able to do it without losing possible information or revealing it. But basically what you do then in this case is inside the database, you would create a username, which you've seen me do before in the past. You create a username for the specific account, and then you would create a password as well for it. And so what you would do in this case is you would go into here, you would add the username, and you would set it specifically to whatever table that you want it to read from. So in this case, since it just needs to read the auth server, you just set it to the auth server, and you give it permissions. How you want to define your permissions up to you, but I'm just showing. You hit save, and now that specific database, with the way that you tunneled, will have access to it. Now, keep in mind that when you're SSH tunneling, you are telling it, hey, I am setting up to be a specific port. So if we go back to the original command that we were talking about with SSH, so if we go to a notepad and I open one up, if we remember the original command, it was ssh-l local port, which is 3000, or in this case we did 10,000, with your standard address, the local host port, with that local port. So in this case it'll be 3306, the remote port, sorry. And then we'll have to type in the username, so we'll type in, say, root at, let's go with your production server, wherever it is. You have to remember that whatever address this is, if it's 10,000, 10,000, and you're running a server already, then it's going to give you an error because you're already going through it. So what you have to do is you have to change, for example, if it's 3306 on the right, you need to change this to a different port. So say 3307. 3307, I have that defined. Here's an example, log on world characters. You in this case would be more than fine with it being 3306 on the world and 3306 on the characters, but your logon would be 3307 with 127.0.0.1 with, say, for example, your username and password information on the right, or database, essentially. Something else you can look into as well is what's called a IDS and IPS, which is an intrusion detection system, right here, or an intrusion prevention system. This is really useful for cybersecurity. There's a bunch of free ones, there's a bunch of paid ones. However, I would genuinely suggest that you take a look at seeing which one you like, or if it's something for you, because this will also help secure your website. Something else to keep in mind is the default webadmin information as far as security is not that secure, so you want to make sure that you install all the updates that are necessary to it, do some quick googling, searching on how to secure webadmin, and go from there. That concludes this video, though, on just general information to do with servers with World of Warcraft. If you have any questions, you're more welcome to leave them inside the comments. I'll be more than happy to help. If there's something that you want covered that's fairly brief or just strange, I'd be more than happy to assist you with that as well. But otherwise, just drop a sub if you like it, because it really helps the content. Alright,